Welcome to page 94 of Anatomy Coloring Book. This is Dr. Stephen Harkins. The special senses, the visual system. Let's start out by talking about the layers of the eye, starting with the sclera. The sclera is a fibrous, white, rubbery, protective globe that makes up the ball of the eye. It is this layer here. Surrounding the eye. And it is continuous with a transparent layer called the cornea. In other words, it's see-through, it's clear. And that's this layer here, the cornea. So the cornea and the sclera appear to be one continuous layer, or connected with one another, and they are, one is clear, one is not. The sclera in red here is not clear, it's white. The cornea is clear. Cornea focuses light rays onto the retina by refracting those rays or bending those rays. The choroid layer underneath absorbs and prevents the scattering of light. It's a pigmented layer. It's this layer here. Pigmented meaning it contains pigments or colors that absorb light. That's the choroid layer. Choroid layer is continuous with a layer here called the ciliary body. It thickens to become the fibromuscular ciliary body that surrounds the lens. The lens, of course, is this structure here. The lens refracts light along with it is see-through, it's transparent, and it refracts or bends light along with the cornea. The choroid, should identify it here, is continuous with the ciliary body, and which are continuous with the suspensory ligaments of the lens. Now the lens can change shape. It can become flatter, or it can become rounder. Also from the ciliary body projecting is this pigmented structure here called the iris. And the iris can open and close or dilate and constrict, widening the pupil or narrowing the pupil. Your iris is responsible for your eye color. And here are your suspensory ligaments attached to your lens. The retina is the actual sensory organ, you could say, of portion of the eye. This is the part that receives the visual stimulation and translates it through the optic nerve to the brain. And that's the innermost layer. The optic disc is an area that right here where there is a blind spot. And it's because it's the area where the optic nerve here enters. I should make it orange. The optic nerve, the nerve fibers enter. That's an area when, and the blood vessels, the optic artery and the optic vein, enter the eye. So this is an area that is not photosensitive. You can't see anything here. So it's known as a blind spot. It's known as the optic disc. There is an area, and you can see the optic disc up here. This is the blind spot right here, because it's the area where the artery and the vein enter, as well as the optic nerve. Now, there is an area that is very, 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 very light sensitive, that is the area of highest visual acuity, and is called the macula lutea. The macula lutea. And it will make it kind of, since here's the retina right here. The retina. And the macula lutea is an extra sensitive area, the area of highest visual acuity, because it has the most rods and cones. This is the highest visual acuity. And it's got a little depression in there, a central area called the fovea centralis. The fovea centralis. It's the most sensitive an area of highest visual acuity. The macula lutea and the fovea centralis. Inside the eye, there is a fluid. There is a fluid inside the eye called the vitreous body. And the fluid is called the vitreous humor. This is the vitreous body containing vitreous humor. And it is behind the lens and in between the lens and the retina, consisting of taking up most of the space of the eyeball. And in front of the lens, there's another fluid called the aqueous humor. Here, the aqueous humor. This is also a liquid, a transparent fluid that light can travel through. So the vitreous humor here, and the aqueous humor, extracellular fluid. The vitreous takes up 80% of the volume of the globe, of the eyeball. The vitreous body and the aqueous humor, the vitreous body containing the vitreous humor. Humor is the fluid. We showed you the optic nerve itself, continuous with the retina, as well as the retinal vein and the retinal artery. Now let's look more specifically at the layers of the retina itself, being as it is the important layer that actually receives the light and translates it into a signal and sends it to the brain. Light passes through from the outside, through the pupil, through the cornea, through the aqueous humor, through the lens, and shines on the back of the eyeball through the vitreous humor and reaches the retina. So it travels in this direction right here. And this is a layer, shown here is a layer of the retina. Right here, coming out. Of course, underneath you have the choroid layer here. This is that pigmented layer underneath the retina. There's some blood vessels in it, some veins in it here. And a microscopic view of what might be happening here. Light coming in. Like so. And here. The rod and cone cells are sensitive to light and color. So the rod cells here, these are sensitive to light, and the cone cells sensitive to color. And they make up what is called the photoreceptive layer. The photoreceptive layer of the retina. This is the important layer where light and color is interpreted. So in red, we have the rod cells interpreting light, sensitive to light, sensitive to light. And then we have cone cells that pick up color right here. Cone cells. So rods and cones. Rod cells for light, cone cells for color. And the light is sort of absorbed and perceived by these cells. Then it is that signal that they receive is now transported through these cells, these what are called bipolar cells. They have two ends. Here's the cell body here. And they have two ends. Bi means two. And they transport the signal this direction and the opposite direction. These bipolar cells, they pick up, you can see they're synapsing here with the rod and cone cells, sending the signal now in the opposite direction of what the sensations that they picked up, light and color. Now they in turn synapse, and that is your bipolar layer, bipolar cell layer. And they in turn synapse with these axons of the neurons, the optic neurons. So this is what they call the ganglion layer here. And they synapse with these ganglia. Then the nerve impulse, and then the next layer is the axonal layer, because of these are the axons of the optic nerve, what becomes the optic nerve, L1, the optic nerve, right here. So, and these are the different layers of the retina. Of course, you have your artery and vein here, your retinal artery, providing blood supply. And here's your retinal arteries here throughout the retina. in the vein. And you can see the area where these come together, called the optic disc right here. And you can imagine why no light can shine, or there's a blind spot there, because if the light comes and hits here, there's no receptors, there's no rods and cones. There's got to be a place for the optic nerve and the blood vessels to exit, and it can't be covered, and it is not covered by a layer of retina. So this is considered a blind spot right here. And of course, these signals travel through the optic nerve to the brain to be interpreted by the brain to know what is in front of us. And this concludes page 94 of Anatomy Coloring Book. This is Dr. Stephen Harkins, The Visual System.